Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving right into a high-stakes, incredibly complex situation revolving around Kim Jong-un. At just 36 years old, he's sitting at the helm of the world's fourth-largest military and a rapidly growing nuclear arsenal. But Kim is a man caught between two completely different worlds. On one side, he's anchored down by the brutal communist traditions of his past, and on the other, he has this massive desire to be accepted on the global stage as a legitimate modern leader. This right here is the ultimate dictator's dilemma. Does he soften his image to bring his country into the modern age, or does he desperately cling to the criminal regime he inherited? Let's explore exactly how this wild tension is playing out.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To really wrap our heads around his predicament, there is a surprisingly perfect comparison here. North Korea is essentially Godfather 3. Just like Michael Corleone trying to step out of the dark shadow of his mafia family to become a legitimate businessman, Kim Jong-un wants to step into the light of the modern world. The problem? He literally inherited a mafia state. Because North Korea is crushed under heavy global sanctions, the regime fundamentally relies on a massive, illegal underworld just to keep the lights on. He wants the world to see him as legitimate, but he absolutely needs that mafia apparatus just to survive.
$2 billion. Let that number sink in for a second. That is exactly why this mafia setup is nearly impossible for him to just dismantle. The North Korean regime practically operates like a giant criminal cartel. Every single year, illicit stuff like selling guns, moving drugs, printing counterfeit cash, and increasingly pulling off major cybercrimes brings in roughly $2 billion in hard currency. It's basically the leader's personal piggy bank. It's the lifeblood of the entire regime. So even while Kim is out there smiling and shaking hands for photo ops with world leaders, he's secretly running an enormously profitable rogue enterprise right in the shadows.
Section 1. The Airport Assassination, a Cold War spy caper in 2017.
That shadow mafia reality completely exploded into public view when Kim's older half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, crossed a massive red line by becoming a CIA informant. The retaliation for this was straight out of a spy thriller. For months before the hit, North Korean agents groomed two young women by tricking them into doing what they thought were hidden camera prank shows. They had them wiping cosmetic baby oil on random strangers' faces. Then, fast forward to February 13, 2017, at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. This time, it wasn't baby oil. It was a highly deadly nerve agent. The women ambushed Kim Jong-nam. And just minutes later, CCTV catches this absolutely chilling detail. A North Korean operative dressed entirely in black, casually pulling a rolly suitcase, checking the airport infirmary just to make sure the target was being treated and the poison was doing its job. Soon after, a chemist tied to the plot was actually caught on camera getting his story straight with North Korean embassy officials. It was an incredibly calculated, old-school hit.
Now, here's where it gets truly wild. The two women, who genuinely had zero idea they were committing a high-stakes murder, were arrested. But the brilliant and terrifying part of this whole operation was the message it sent. After all the international shockwaves, Kim Jong-nam's body was finally returned to North Korea. But guess who accompanied the body on the flight? The very same North Korean operatives who were spotted at the airport orchestrating the murder. That was absolutely deliberate. It was a giant, unmistakable billboard to everyone inside North Korea and to the rest of the world. Kim will find you. It was just a brutal, undeniable flex of mafia power.
Section 2. Two worlds. The paranoia of Pyongyang versus the freedom of Switzerland. Now, to really understand why the guy operates like this, you have to look at the crazy psychological whiplash of his childhood. On one side, you have his life in Pyongyang. It's this intensely paranoid hidden kingdom. I mean, North Korea has an estimated 8,000 secret underground tunnels just to hide their leadership from spy satellites. As a kid, his playmates weren't normal kids. They were 30 to 40-year-old heavily armed bodyguards. His life was so micromanaged that every single grain of rice he ate was hand-inspected for perfection, and he even traveled with portable toilets so foreign intelligence couldn't analyze his health. But then, look at the flip side. In his teenage years, he lived over in Switzerland with his aunt and uncle. He went to a regular public school in Bern. Classmates remember him decked out in Chicago Bulls gear and Michael Jordan shoes, playing super competitive street basketball. He got to live the life of a relatively normal, wealthy teenager in Europe, experiencing Western freedom right up close. But wow, did that Western freedom vanish fast. Back in North Korea, Kim's mother was dying of cancer. His aunt and uncle realized their royal connection was about to disappear, and fearing they'd be cast aside, they made a desperate run for it. They fled to the U.S. Embassy, claimed political asylum, and were eventually relocated by the CIA to run a dry cleaner in Middle America. They literally left him in the middle of the night. So at just 17 years old, Kim is ripped out of Europe, dragged back to North Korea, and told to prepare to rule the most repressive dictatorship on the planet.
Section 3. Rebranding the regime. Building a socialist fairyland. As soon as he became supreme leader, you could see that Western influence bubbling up. He practically promised his citizens they'd never have to tighten their belts again, and he set out to rebrand the entire country. In 2012, completely inspired by his time in the Alps, he ordered this massive ski resort to be built. He's developing amusement parks, high-end department stores, and expanding cell phone and internet access just to woo the younger generation. He even authorized state-backed social media influencers to push this image of North Korea as a socialist fairyland. And on top of all that, he elevated his wife, Ri Sol-ju, a former famous singer, and gave her the title of First Lady. Together, they're intentionally projecting this modern aspirational couple dynamic to kind of humanize him. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. How do you actually modernize without completely losing your grip on the country? Handing out cell phones, backing influencers, trying to open up the economy, all of that means increasing access to outside information. And that is the absolute worst nightmare for a dictator. If the citizens realize what life is actually like outside of North Korea, the whole illusion of their socialist fairyland just shatters. For Kim Jong-un, that's terrifying. He desperately needs to modernize to keep people happy, but doing so could literally destroy his entire regime. Section 4. The Dual Dictatorship. The Rise of the Sweet Princess. So what's the solution to this massive headache? It's actually right inside his own family. Back in 2001, his dad made this comment that his sons were basically idle blockheads, and it was his daughters who really had the intellect for politics. Enter Kim Yo-jong. Known growing up as the sweet princess, she agreed to jump into the nitty-gritty of politics in 2011, becoming her brother's chief of propaganda. By 2018, she's stepping out onto the world stage at the South Korean Winter Olympics, fascinating everyone with this quiet, sphinx-like smile. But things got dark pretty quickly. By early 2020, her brother promotes her right over the heads of seasoned military generals to be absolute highest level of the Politburo. And then, in June 2020, she makes her power absolutely undeniable by personally ordering the explosive demolition of a joint inter-Korean government complex. Yeah, the sweet princess definitely grew some teeth. Intelligence experts don't mince words, they bluntly call her a shark. She isn't just running PR, she's the ultimate gatekeeper. Any document going to Kim Jong-un is almost certainly viewed by her first. And it gets darker. Sources believe she has personally ordered executions. She's completely taken on the role of aggressively bashing South Korea and the United States, which is a super hostile posture usually reserved only for the supreme leader himself. Which brings us to his brilliant, completely terrifying fix for his dilemma, the dual dictatorship. By elevating his sister Kim Jong-un, creates this system where he stays completely above the fray. He doesn't have to be the guy signing off on public executions or screaming threats on state TV. He gets to reinvent himself as a modern, approachable politician with a softer image. Meanwhile, Kim Yo-jong is playing the ultimate bad cop. She wields all the traditional tools of the Kim dynasty: the fear, the aggression, the strict discipline. He gets the legitimate spotlight, and she manages the mafia muscle right there in the shadows. So, we're left staring at this really critical question. Kim Jong-un wants to have his cake and eat it too. He's relying heavily on this dual dictatorship to keep his own hands clean while maintaining absolute terror-driven control over his people. But can a regime that's constantly playing this two-faced game, acting like a modern state on the surface while secretly running a brutal mafia operation in the dark, really sustain itself? Will this highly calculated shadow routine actually be enough to finally end 70 years of isolation, or will the crushing weight of their own criminal enterprise eventually bring this nuclear dynasty crashing down? It's a massive, high-stakes tightrope walk, and honestly, the whole world is holding its breath. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope it gave you a fresh look into the mind of a modern dictator.